Captain America, the newest MCU movie and the first of the year. I won't lie, I'm actually pretty excited about this movie. It'll be really nice to get a superhero movie after the year of anti-heroes and villains we got in 2024. Like seriously, Joker, Venom, Deadpool and Wolverine, Agatha, Penguin, Kraven, and Madam Web. I know she's not a villain, but she's far from a hero in my opinion. Anyway, I'm also really excited to see Sam Wilson as Captain America in his very own. I think it's cool that Harrison Ford is in one of these. The fact that it's a spy thriller or espionage type thing, at least the trailers make it seem like that, similar to Winter Soldier, seems cool. And I'm just praying this movie doesn't blow. Today I'm going to make the lead of the movie Captain America. So here's how to do it. So firstly, I start by cutting out the pattern for the body. To do that, I look up Anthony Mackie and use this image of him for reference. It doesn't show the legs, but I can probably just guess based on the rest of the build. Contrary to my belief, he's actually only 5'10", as opposed to something like 6 foot or 6'2". I use this brown felt, then cut out the body to the best of my ability. I use this caramel brown for the skin tone. Once cut out, I sew it together. Each body part is simply two sides, so all you have to do is sew them together and stuff it. With the body done, I move on to the head. Firstly, I cut out these circles and sew the triangles at the top and bottom together. Next is the eyes. You can always just cut out black circles with felt, which would be easier, but I'm using button. When placing the eyes on, try to make it accurate to the face. His eyes aren't as close together as most people's, but not far enough apart to be weird. After putting in the eyes, I cut out these lips, then I sew it in as one with the mouth, which is just black thread. I then sew the triangles on the back of the head and attach them together. Then I stuff the head and close it. I am not cooking, with this creature looking a little silly. I then paint the hair on since it's so thin on his head. I still did not cook. Sorry, Anthony. Next is the costume. I'm going to start with the legs. I cut out these two pieces of fabric. I sew each pant leg, then sew the pieces together. I flip them inside out so they're proper. I cut out the black squares for the boots, then sew it together. I then flatten it so the seam line is on the back and I sew the bottom of the boot. Then I flip it and sew it over the end of the pant leg. Then I cut out this piece, which is meant to be the shirt. I sew both sides, making sure to leave a hole open for the arms. I flip it and pull it over the body. Then I sew it to the pants. I then cut out these sleeves, then sew the sides of the sleeves and flip them. I slip them over the arms and sew them to the shirt. With the base of the costume finished, it's now all about the details. I start from the very bottom with the soles. I sew those on, then get to the armor. I cut these two pieces out, then sew the back and put them on the boot before sewing it down. Then I add the armor on the front of the foot, then the back. To finish it off, I paint the silver lining on. Now that the paint has dried and the boots are finished, I detail the pants. First, I cut out the front side details of the pants. I sew the crotch piece together, then sew it down. I then sew the outer sides to the pants. I fold those over to be on the front. Then I do the crotch zipper part. Now with the reference I have, it's hard to tell if these arrow pieces on the legs is blue or gray. I remember that I could care less and make it gray. Then I sew it to the leg. Now because I don't have reference for the back of his legs besides what I've done, I call it quits and move up to the sleeves. Firstly, I cut out the shoulder pads. Then I sew the triangles together. I then sew the shoulder pads down. I cut out these strips, which are bands that go around his biceps. I sew it into a circle, then sew them around the biceps. Outside of paint work, that's kind of all for the arms. I paint the arms, then move to the torso. I cut out the white tummy part of his suit, then sew it on. There's a triangle piece on his stomach area, so I cut that out and sew it on. I do this to space the red lines correctly. I then sew the red line on the front, then cut out the red on both sides and sew it to the torso. Because it's so barren, I very lightly draw on lines on the front of the suit with a marker. I move to the upper chest armor. First I cut out the full piece. Then I cut it up into separate lines to make the lines on the suit. You don't have to do this, but do it if you want to. I would recommend not doing it. It doesn't really add good detail in my opinion. I sew on the top armor. Then I sew the logo onto the main piece. If you decide not to cut it up, just sew it straight to the main piece. Full thing, same as I did. I sew the last piece onto the costume. Next is the belt. This is only 4 pieces. First, I cut out the front and back, then sew them to the front and back. Then I cut out the side pieces, and sew them to, would you believe it, the sides! Finally, I just have to paint it all. Once dry, I remember that there's these little gray lines next to the chest plate, so I cut those out and sew them on. Next, I cut out the straps for the wing pack. Jetpack? I don't know. I sew the red piece on, and sew that to the costume. Now there's painted details on the straps, so I paint those on. Once it's dry, I move on to the gloves. Firstly, I cut out the base of the gloves, which will just be black. Remember, these are fingerless gloves, so make sure there's a hole on both ends. Then sew the sides. I put the gloves on, then cut out the red piece that goes around the hand. I sew it and slip it on. Once it's sewn on, I cut out the underside of the forearm. It's all red going around. I sew it on, then cut out the outer forearm armor piece. I sew them to the gloves. Now I just have to paint the gloves. With the gloves painted, I can make the goggles. I cut out the visor first. I was gonna draw the eyes on, but then I noticed the absolute aura it gave him, so he's not having eyes. Next, I cut out the band that keeps it around his head. I sew it to the visor. Next, I add most of the detail in paint. I messed up a little bit on the front, unfortunately, but it's fine. I wait for it to dry. All that's left now is the pack on his back. I start by cutting out the base shape of the pack. Then I cut out these 2 shapes that are slightly larger, but I sew them together so they give it some dimension. Then I sew them to the pack. Once they're sewn on, it gives me a better judgment of how to cut out the side pieces. I sew one on and then sew half of the other on before closing it. I stuff it, then sew it up. For detailing it, I can't find many images that show me the detail very well besides a toy, so I'm going off that. I sew the Y shape on in a lighter gray felt. Then I add a piece on top. I sew that to the back of the costume. Next, I paint the rest of the detail on using these paints. With the painting detail done, Captain America is finally finished. That's it. Captain America. He's done. That's it. Nothing else. At all. Nothing. Okay, fine, I'll do the stupid shield. And the shield is the easiest part of this whole thing. First, you want to cut out the main red circle that everything will be based off. Then cut a gray one by tracing it over the red one. Once you have those 2, you can cut the white circle in the middle. Then keep doing that till you have all 4 pieces. Then you'll want to cut out the star in front of the shield. This part is kind of annoying. Here's my messed up one. If you want to, instead of freehanding the star, you can always draw it on paper, then cut it out and use it as a stencil. Now, you'll just want to sew it all together, starting at the star on the blue circle to the main red one. Don't sew the gray to the rest yet. Before you sew the 2 main pieces together, you're going to want to get a plastic mesh to cut out and put in the middle. If you don't have that and don't want to get it, cardboard works just as well. I only use plastic because it's machine washable. Put that in between the pieces, then sew it in. Now all that's left is the strap. I cut out these bands from brown stretchy fabric. I sew them into circles, then sew them onto the shield. Make sure it's to size with your cap's forearms. That's all for the shield. Now you've got your real Captain America, because apparently that's all it takes. Or at least that's how it feels in the MCU. Like, Sam's all iffy on if he's actually Captain America or not. But then he gets the shield, and he's like, oh, I'm Captain America now. I'm complete. That's the missing puzzle piece. Or like John Walker. They don't announce a new Captain America until they get the shield back. And then it's like, yes, John Walker is going to be the new Captain America because he's wielding the shield. Or like, can't they just make another one if they don't get the real one back? Like, I'm sure they could probably get vibranium. How'd they make it originally? Like, I know they got vibranium, but like, did they just get it like that? Or did they have to make it that shape? Like, how'd they have the tech to make it that nice when vibranium has struggled to be broken in modern day with all the magic super tech that already exists? You know what? It doesn't matter. I wonder if now that we've got adamantium in the MCU, we'll get that on the shield too. Anyway, that's it for Captain America. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you in any way at all, where you were able to make your own Captain America. Remember that you're totally free to take your own creative liberties with this, and that my video is merely just to assist you in your own makings. Make sure to send me what you've made if you have made it over on my Instagram, which will be linked in the description below. I was planning on making the helmet and wings, but to be honest, I really don't feel like it, and I'm happy with what I've done. He's turned out a lot better than I anticipated. If this video does well enough, I'll do it, but that just means, like, enough people want me to do it, you know, comments, likes, subscribers, the whole thing. Who knows? Maybe you're watching this right now in a future where the end card is going to be that tutorial video. Anyway, there's another MCU character to add to the collection. I wonder how long I can keep this up. What's the next movie? Oh no. Oh dear God, no. No, don't make me do it! No, no, no!